you, Lauren, so much for joining this evening. Your story is very close to my heart. Having been a cancer thriver, shall I say, as well. I love how inspiring your story is. I mean, yours is unique. Your visit or visitation, should I say, with cancer as a guest came a couple of times, and it inspired you to write a book. So I don't want to give much of it away, but I just want to say thank you for joining. I know you've shared this story so many times before, but it's very, very special to me that you could share it on my platform as well. So is that Helen? No, there's Lisa. You look just like a lady I know, Helen. Hello, Lisa. So Lauren, over to you. Thanks for coming to my kitchen. And yes, the kitchen is yours.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me into your kitchen. I think it's a really lovely format, and I love the informality of it. And I think in that spirit, I would really encourage this to be a conversation. It's a small enough group that we can just really have a conversation about it. And you know, when I thought about doing this talk at this particular moment in time, it felt to me, and I have spoken once before about this, but it feels like that the journey that I went through with my cancer diagnosis is really instructive in this moment in our life, because there's so many parallels that I wouldn't have imagined between cancer and COVID. And so part of what I want to just do tonight is also to make those parallels and to engage with people around those parallels. But for those of you who don't know me, I am a 55-year-old mother of two, and I'm not defined by cancer, although I have been diagnosed 4 times with it, and it certainly has given me a particular identity in the world that is, yeah, unique, I suppose, and a unique perspective. And when we were discussing this conversation tonight, what Elaine and I both said to each other very spontaneously in the prep call was that, you know, if a person came along and said to us, would you want to wave a wand and get rid of your cancer experience? I think both of us had the same answer, which is no. And I think there's a reason for it, because I think that despite the obstacles and difficulties, there's so much to learn. But maybe before I go there, I'll just very briefly talk about the different diagnoses, just to put the journey into context. I was first diagnosed with a stage 2 melanoma when I was 23 years old. Sorry, I don't know where 15 came. Maybe it felt like I was 15. I felt very young. And it's so interesting because I'm now studying psychoanalysis, and I've learned the concept of babies spitting out things that they don't want. And what I think I did with that diagnosis was I had to be treated. In fact, Jess was the person who I was diagnosed. I was with Jess when I was diagnosed, and I didn't really take on what it meant. And it was not such a concern of mine at that point. I spat it out, so to speak. And I don't think it influenced my life. And I think it was only when I was 45 and diagnosed again that cancer really started being an issue for me. And I was now married. I had 2 children, and the radiologist discovered an early breast cancer. But because of my previous experience, they treated me with such a degree of anxiety, if I can put it like that. And my surgeon said to me, you know, there's only one treatment you can have here. It has to be a mastectomy. You have to get rid of any kind of possibility of this cancer coming back. And so I did that. I went for a mastectomy, a double mastectomy, despite the small cancer. And I really felt like in my life that was the issue of cancer dealt with. It had been kind of put aside for me, and I felt like, yes, I can get on with living, and I was given a new lease in life. And then lo and behold, I started feeling a pain on my right side, and the pain didn't go away. And I kept going to the radiologist, and he said, this is not another cancer, no ways, this is a scar tissue. Let's just keep watching it. And what we were watching was actually a rather large tumor growing on the right side in a very small percentage of the breast tissue that was left after a mastectomy, because there's always some. And I think I was in such a state of shock and disbelief. I just couldn't believe that this had happened to me. And I'm going to talk about the kind of treatment in that third diagnosis. But at the end of 18 rounds of chemo and 36 radiotherapies, I actually thought, really, now I've dealt with it. And lo and behold, I was planning my holiday, getting my camping equipment together like a hill in Phoenix. And I was diagnosed with another malignant melanoma, a stage 2 melanoma on my arm, and wasn't sure if it was a secondary or primary. And so the poor dermatologist who gave me this news, like, looked up and said, you know, where is God in all this? He's quite a religious man. And I didn't know where God was either. So that's in a nutshell is, I went on to have an operation to get rid of that melanoma on my arm. And that was now 5 years ago. And I think for this conversation tonight, I just want to focus on, for me, what were the 6 challenges during my journey, and really to look at the opportunities they presented and why I feel so strongly that these stories are stories that need to be told, because they're also about the present tense. And I think for me, the first thing about cancer and the world of cancer is just how you step into a world that is so different from the world that you know. And the parallels are obvious, but let me talk first about my cancer world. It's an invisible disease, cancer. So 1 minute you're absolutely fine, and the next minute you have a very serious and deadly illness. And at the time of your diagnosis, you're filled with this incredible kind of fear and anxiety and unknowing and shock. There's incredible discontinuity in life. And I think because of my multiple diagnoses, I also was filled with kind of a self-contempt and a self-pity in a way, because I asked myself, is my body telling me something that I don't understand? Had I in fact caused these repeated cancer diagnoses? And along with that kind of self-questioning and self-doubt, there's also an incredible number of decisions you have to make as a cancer patient. And one of the very difficult decisions I made early on was not to have the treatment that my oncologist advised for me. So I didn't have the Red Devil chemotherapy that had been offered, or the oncologist said I must have, because I had a genetic test and the test said, you won't respond to this particular chemo drug. And I took a very difficult decision with my husband, who's a doctor, to say I'm not going with that treatment. But be that as it may, I think that I had to basically learn how to enter this new world, what Susan Sontag calls the kingdom of the sick. And there are no rules in that world that you understand. It's an entirely new landscape. I became a kind of stranger to myself. I had to learn a new language. And it's like, I always compare it to being in a car with the GPS saying recalculating, because I didn't know for so long what direction it would be taking and where my true north would be, where I would end up in that journey. And I think one aha moment for me was when a coach who I'd been speaking to, who was a cancer survivor, stage 4 survivor, said to me, you have to read Viktor Frankl. And I don't know how many of you have read Man's Search for Meaning. It's a book about Frankl's experience in the Nazi death camps, and his whole family was wiped out. And there's one extraordinary line in the book, which is, everything can be taken away from a man, but one thing, to choose one's attitude in any circumstance. And that really helped me to say to myself, although I can't change these diagnoses and I can't help what's happening to me, I can change how I relate to it. And I can become an autonomous actor, even though this thing feels like it's invading me from the inside. And I think that was such an important lesson. And I think, today here we are, we're not in the kingdom of the sick per se, but I feel like we've stepped into the kingdom of the pandemic, and we find ourselves equally in a place where there are no rules, and where the magnitude and scope of this pandemic is beyond anything we've imagined. And we're living with such high levels of uncertainty and unpredictability. And we've lost our grip. We don't have that old reality. And I think that in the same way, I had to learn how to adapt, and that adaptability becomes such a core feature of being a cancer patient. You have to keep on adapting to what's thrown at you. I think too, we are hastily assembling new forms of rules and regulations, and things are changing, and we have to go for new languages. And I think that's something that we really are living with. Should I just keep going for a bit, Elaine? Should I?
I'm so enjoying it. Absolutely. And I think I can feel, which is why I like to watch the gallery. And I can feel we all just are really, really enjoying your candidness. And I think it's really important that people hear one's real stories. It's, I know both of us coming from sort of the same cultures. For me, definitely, it was like, don't mention that word. And it's like, mention it. So please go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, the second challenge for me was just literally facing the pain and learning perseverance. I mean, my friends who are there all know I'm a sprinter. I'm not a marathon runner. And I think that the difficulty with cancer is that the physical treatments you have to go through require a long distance runner mentality. And I think my experience was just made so much worse because the chemotherapy that I had to do 18 times involved 3 needles every single time. And that meant 72 injections. Now that number rolls off my tongue. I don't have to calculate anymore. And I had to kind of learn how to deal with that. And I'll never forget, Carol kind of gave me the number of her acupuncturist, and I thought, okay, I'm going to deal with my needle phobia with a flooding technique, and I'm going to go and have needles put in every part of my body. And Carol knows that story ended very badly for me because I had such a reaction to having needles in my head, and it didn't do what acupuncture does for so many. But I tried very many different routes. And, the counsel that I think I learned from that time was, you cannot go over it, you cannot go under it, you have to go through it. And I think that it was hard for me because there's this expectation, and we use the word cancer warrior. And what I learned in terms of becoming a cancer warrior was not to think of myself in terms of being amazingly strong and on top of it, but letting the fear in and keeping that fear in a place where I could work with it and work through it. And that cancer warriors can be fearful too, not just these mighty images of women taking this journey on. And I think that's something that I learned in terms of endurance and perseverance. And again, I think that we are in the middle of learning about perseverance with COVID. We started off in thinking this would be a very quick thing. We thought this was a kind of Chinese disease, as some people like to call it, or a Samsonite traveling class disease with only the rich getting it initially. But I think now we're sitting with the fact that this is a long-term and long, torturous marathon for this country. And I think lockdown is quite similar in that way to chemotherapy, because it involves isolating yourself from the world, a lack of freedom of movement, added to a breakdown of the economy in this country. And the realities are sometimes as hard as the disease itself, which in terms of the actual solutions being creating their own complications, like chemotherapy did for me. My next challenge was the difficult one, which was how to talk about death and learning how to confront it. And, you talk, Elaine, about the shame and the taboo around cancer. Well, I think there's a double taboo in our society about talking about death. And I think that it's not helpful when you're sitting with this anxiety in you about the possibility of your dying, not to be able to talk about it. And, you know, you're confronted by death along the way in the cancer journey in so many ways. I mean, in the chemotherapy room, one day there's someone next to you, and the next day or next week, they're not there. But in my internal life, I had to sort of start confronting what it might mean for my children and my husband. And I did a lot of work with that. I wrote lists. I wrote lots of lists that I would kind of mark out what I called my fears in the middle of the night. And I wrote letters to my children about important occasions in their night, in their lives. I wrote letters to my friends that I didn't ever give them. But I think that the act of writing for me was an act of taking control of that fear. And so I didn't speak about this a lot to the outside world, but I certainly started thinking about it a lot for myself. And I think this interesting thing for me is that the proximity of death in one's life sharpens the appreciation for life. And that's the paradox of illness. You know, Freud, I'm also learning in one of his papers, wonders why it is that people who are ill get so much closer to the truth than people who are not ill. And I think it's such a good question. And I think it's because you have this appreciation for the world. The smells of the world become sharper and more intense. The sights become more pleasurable. And I think that, you know, that is something that we can only grasp when we're in that state, but I wish I could keep. And I think it's something when I think about COVID and how death has become so omnipresent for so many people. It is a wish of mine, in fact, that we could keep this feeling of the fragility of life, because I think it allows us to increase our engagement with the world in a very particular way. And I think that's, we've seen some of that around us, but it's a feature for me of the journey. I think there's another very huge feature of it is building communities. And, you know, the tendency for some people is to keep the cancer journey away from the details away. And people will laugh at me. I was the opposite. I was sending emails out. I was communicating my experience. But I think what that did and what it helped me to have around me was not just family, but also people who could build and rebuild the scaffolding of my life every time it fell apart. And people would arrive with baskets full of tapestry to do sewing so that I could have positive associations with needles. And others put poetry in my post box, and others came with turmeric and chicken soup and meals. And I think, you know, the thing about cancer is it can be the loneliest of journeys, because you are ultimately alone and facing to build and fortify relationships. And I came to like myself more. I came to understand what kindness meant to myself. And I learned that through the kindness of others. And that was, I think, for me, one of the things that I really treasure when I say I don't want the fairy godmother to take this away. And I think that's what led to the paradox in the title of my book, Cancer, a Love Story. In some ways, I experience cancer as a life-giving force, despite the fact that it's such a deadly, potentially destructive force. It for me, and I'm fortunate to say this, but it gave me an opportunity to look at relationships in a new way. And I think COVID's doing the same for us, by the way. I think that despite all our complaints in South Africa, there is the hum of some kind of resilient energy in this society, and the constancy of connection and people. And even though we don't safely gather, I think we feed off each other in new ways, including the Zoom call. Phoenix Cahill and I and Luando built a whole project over Zoom, and we've become family, even though we don't, you know, haven't had long connections. And I think it's something to hold on to, that we so seek connection, and it's something so precious. My second last challenge, and I'll stop talking after the sixth one, this is number 5, was the whole question for me of privilege and responsibility. And I think that as a South African, I became so acutely aware through my journey of cancer of such immense privilege.
A bit of lag your
And
side. Losing you a little bit, Lauren. Can you hear me, Lauren?
Go through this. I mean, 1 in 8 South African women are diagnosed with breast cancer, and most of them are coming into this system with a very, very late stage diagnosis, which is really what tells you the prognosis if you're going to survive this or not. So 60% of newly diagnosed cancer patients arrive with stage 3 or 4 breast cancer in a public hospital. And that's because there's not equipment in their communities, they're not aware, and there are no specialists to treat in rural areas. And 9 times as many women in South Africa die of this disease compared to the US. And I felt like, what could I do to kind of give back? And writing this book for me was one way of giving back, because I think telling a story is always about sharing and overcoming cultural barriers and silences. And I spent quite a lot of time telling my story to groups who didn't have that privilege of access to stories. And I think I also joined the Breast Health Foundation afterwards, and we're busy, in fact, at this moment, although it hasn't come to fruition, with a program to establish the first chemo center in Limpopo. There is no chemo center in Limpopo. Women who have cancer in that area have to travel on a bus, and they either stay in Joburg for 3 weeks or travel back in a very sick state. But it's a totally untenable position. So I think, again, that the kind of privilege and the sense of responsibility that privilege brings is a very important gift. And, my involvement I never would have met these women in Bushbuckridge if it hadn't been for this journey. And they've enriched my life enormously. And then I think the last real challenge that I want to talk about, and I think we can all talk about, is the eternal question for every patient who has cancer, which is, will life ever return to normal? Because when you're in the midst of it, you do not feel like you will get your life back. And I think that I have good news. You do get your life back. But there is an incredible journey that you can't anticipate when you're in it, because all you want to do is get to the end of it, is how to deal with survivorship. And it has its own challenges. For 18 months, I was locked away in this world where I didn't have as many meetings, where I didn't reach out, where my life was kind of controlled by every appointment. My time was dictated to by hospital visits. And suddenly, I was faced again with this new possibility to again indulge in dreams and have unedited desires, even though the shadow of death still always lurks, that, one day could something happen, but you have to learn to live with that shadow. And I think that actually what I've seen 5 years on is how hard it is to hold on to the intensity of the feelings that permeate with that space of crisis and the positive feelings I've been describing here. And I don't think I've always succeeded, to tell you the truth, in holding on to the vulnerability and the gratitude and the love and the community. I think that hasn't always been something I can say I've kept, but I think that the enduring feeling of kindness, both to myself and to others, I hope, has become something of a way of life. And I think, that is something in this epidemic that also challenges us, and we can all, I think, learn about survivorship and how to hold on to what matters, because I think, we need that. And I think our activism is more important.
Losing you.
In
There's a bit of lag on your side. Can you hear me, Lauren? Oh, hopefully she can. Can give me a thumbs up, those of you. Can you hear Lauren? Sorry, we lost you for about 3 sentences.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
We were all like, yes. I
don't know where you lost me, but yeah, do I need to repeat anything? Sorry.
Just that last sentence that you said, yeah, just dealing when you're dealing with surviving and
yeah, just how much more challenging it is to hold on and remember the values that come out of the experience of being in this thing. And I was just talking about COVID and how we have an opportunity today, I think, to really keep the experience of the fragility of our lives close to our hearts, so that we can also, use the intensity of these times and the emotionality of these times really to allow us to connect in new ways as we are tonight. Absolutely. So I think that's I can go on, but let me stop there and invite conversation around these 6 challenges and themes and anything else. And obviously you're going to participate in the story as well.
So I'm just going to add on, I think it's really interesting how there's really something about timing. I know you've told your story a couple of times, many times before. You've written your book, and here we sit, and like you say, we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's not at the beginning of it, and it's not at the beginning of when I started the show last year in May. It's now March. And like you say, who would have thought that it would have gone on so long? But the relevance of how there is a similarity, I feel, having gone through the journey myself, to everybody going through this, a simplification in our lives, a necessity to be cognizant of the divinity of the small things. Practicing, I know you go through an intense experience like going through treatment of cancer, and you have to sort of look at various things in your life, recalibrate and kind of look at gratitude. But it's now, it's not the individual. We were individually, even though so many people are diagnosed with cancer, it's a pandemic, it's globally affecting everybody simultaneously. And how do we integrate these things that you've gained from this experience, that I've gained from the experience in our everyday life? And so sharing the story is really, really pivotal, so that people can connect. And I don't know about you, but for me, one of the things, you said cancer, and especially going through treatment, it can be very lonely. But I did find that actually my biggest question before I personally got diagnosed was, I felt I was busy, but I felt detached from people. I felt quite alone. And when I went through the treatment, I was astounded at how people come together, how people came and helped me. You say how people came and brought you chicken soup, and the tapestries. I mean, isn't that the most exquisite way of sharing with you how to overcome the needle issue, which I can certainly relate to. I mean, and it's just, we need to share this. So I love your sharing. And I'd like to open it up to anybody who has questions to either of us. Please go ahead. And I'm so wanting to just continue this conversation. Hello, Kendall, my friend Kendall's in the house. So good to see you. Hi. So is anybody wanting to just ask questions while we've got Lauren here and me here? Interesting time, and definitely a correlation between, let's see. Yes, please. Yes. Please unmute yourself and go ahead, ask a question. Feel free to open your video if you feel like it. I see your hands up. Yes, go ahead, ask the question. Maybe Lauren, you ask.
I don't, Luando, okay. Oh, my mic had an issue, she's saying, okay. Do you want to write your question, Luando? She's going to fix it, okay. So Luando is someone who came into my life after this journey had sort of ended, but she I think is one of the people that has been such a strong connection for me in the last few years, and we've really reached out in many ways with each other in getting through very difficult challenges.
Losing you every now and again, Lauren. My sound is still here. Are all of you moving? Yes. We keep on losing you now and again, Lauren.
But is my connection unstable? Oh no, I think maybe I must try and go to a new place, Elaine.
Okay, traveling along. See, we can still be connected and you can travel virtually. Anyone else wants to just share to the conversation? Who else has their, yes, Khalil Phoenix.
Hi, everyone. I just have a question in terms of, I can understand this experience of severe trauma, be it, this pandemic or cancer, or whatever. And from a personal capacity, I've always struggled with this idea of a God or of, So I wanted to know from both of your experiences if your cancer experience brought you any closer to this idea of spirituality or of something, I don't know, just that connection to something bigger than yourself, even if it is, again, I don't really know how to eloquently phrase what I'm asking, but did it impact you in any spiritual way that you feel still resonates with yourself now, and it wasn't solely a coping mechanism in those moments? That's my question.
It's a very good question. Do you want to go first, Elaine?
You go for it. I'll chat afterwards.
It is such a good question, Phoenix, because I'm not a religious person in the sense of believing in a God, but I certainly think that the journey of spirituality became, I think everything I've described for me feels like a spiritual kind of awakening, in the sense that some people describe religion in that way. It gave me a capacity to question and find faith. I don't think I found God. I found faith in the sense of the people around me.
Unstable Wi-Fi a little bit, Lauren. Hi, Kevin, by the way, you can hear me. Sorry, we lost you again a little bit, Lauren.
Oh, no, I don't know what to do here.
If there are any apps of yours that are on, close them.
Okay.
But just
answer the question, Elaine, and I'm going to go and I think that's because there's another computer in the house. So
see if that computer gets switched off. So I'm going to continue. Where are you, Khalil? So for me, it certainly did. It's a definitive yes. I did have a very strong sense of spirituality before. What it did do is it brought it much closer to me. So maybe if my idea of a higher force or God was there, part of my life, but not really in my everydayness, it felt very present. I'm very, very comfortable with my spirituality. And I felt like there was a reason why I got diagnosed, and I felt like I had a purpose and something important I needed to do with it. And it immediately just made me feel like what I'm doing now, work of service, is the most important thing to me. And if I hadn't gone through cancer, I couldn't have been doing the work that I'm doing now. I think there's something that happens, I would say, when you are diagnosed with something as serious as cancer, you know, it's not really just like a cold. There's a really strong chance you just might go. So that confrontation with death is real. So I kind of, I had this visual of you standing at a cliff. And there are two options when you stand at a cliff. You look down and it's really far down and it's just like, you know, you're gone if you jump off, or you turn around. So you're given a choice straight away. You want to live or die. I kind of felt that quite strongly. And if you choose life, you have to be able to turn around, but confront everything, not little, like everything, physically, mentally, emotionally, like see the whole picture. And because we went through, you know, I had 18 months as well going through treatment, you have to go through all those layers. And in that, the thing that I came across so strongly and straight away was I was not alone. Like there was no part of, I had people in my life, that strangers, I had friends, but I had a very strong sense of higher force that was always looking after me. And now I don't feel like death as now I see just as a transition to a different type of life. I don't have fear of it. So that's my experience of it. So it makes me really excited about life. And Lauren had mentioned it earlier on, you know, when you get that close to the edge, to the cliff, you embrace life that much more. And you know, all of us, even with the pandemic, you know, as Lauren has pointed out, like there's a similarity. We were all so busy and rushing around, and what did it do? It made us all slow down. It made us all realize how amazing it was to connect, because we had to isolate. I mean, nothing natural about isolating and social distancing. That is not a natural thing for humans to do, but yet we've had to, you know, to a, you know, and then you start realizing the magnificence in just the small things in life. So, you know, I would, like Lauren said earlier, I would never take that experience away. So in that conversation, clearly that is, you know, where spirituality is a very big part of my everyday. So. Lauren,
am I back? Can you hear me? No, because I just do want to say, and actually I've now just, the thought escaped me. Sorry, it will come back to me. It was another layer of the answer to Phoenix's question about spirituality and religion. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I was going to say that in a way, when I was going through it, Phoenix, I envied people who were religious. Because I think that when you have religion as your structure and as a force in your life to draw on, and you have that kind of sense of inevitability of death, or there's a philosophy around death that you ascribe to, I think that it's so much easier. And I think that what I had to do was work very hard to get to a point of feeling comfortable along the journey, in a way that if I'd had a pastor or a rabbi or someone in my life, it would have just made it much simpler. So I did envy those people in some respects.
Okay. Iwanda, do you, how's your, is your mic back?
I'm all good.
Yay.
Sorry, it's just I'm using Zoom on my phone, and I didn't realize I didn't give the app permission to use my microphone. So sorry about that. I would show my face, but it's nighttime and I have all kinds of creams and serums on my face. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Luando.
This is so lovely, you know. I think we've been caught up in our project around the Constitution and all of that we've forgotten that we are people with our own lives, our own experiences and histories. And even though I know the cancer story, I think every time I hear it, it kind of like, it bit by bit, I think completes the picture of who you are. And it helps me not forget that, because sometimes, you know, I just see you as someone managing a very big project. And I think listening to you just now just reminded me, oh, this is Lauren. Lauren, the person, Lauren, the wife, the mother, Lauren, who's had cancer 4 times. And I think one of the things that you said that you feel like it informs your identity. And I was going to say that my experience of you is that I'm aware that you've had cancer 4 times, but, you know, somehow it feels like you've transcended it. And it feels like, and not transcended it in a way that, that you want to forget it, or it's in your past, or you no longer want to associate with it. But just in terms of how you've harnessed everything, and how you've channeled the power that you've gotten from that experience, to a point where, it makes me understand why you show up the way that you show up. And I think you show up in a sense of nothing is insurmountable. Even in our working relationship, everything can get done. Nothing is too big, nothing is impossible. And I think that's the energy that balances out my overly cautious energy. And and I think that cancer then explains that maybe there is a sense of investing your time in things that are worthwhile, and fighting for those things. And I think working with you, I've realized that there's room for joy all the time, regardless of the stress, whether the joy comes in the form of a Thai curry or a brownie or a quarter of a chocolate. I could go on and on, but I guess my question is, I have two, is how did you, having 2 young children, how do you talk about death to them and the possibility of you not being here for those moments? Or did you also keep that inside and just wrote them letters and, explaining all of this in the letters? But did you have conversations with them, and how did they take that? Because I'm sure it's quite tricky. You want them to have sort of those innocent lives at that age where they're not consumed, by a mother's sickness and having the heaviness of that, and still wanting to keep it, light and joyous, and not having it define everyone's life in the house. And I guess my other question is, what does love mean to you? And I'm asking because love has become my fascination in the last year, and trying to figure out what people think about love and how they define it. So if it's a love story, what is love?
Wow. I can always rely on Luando to ask the most challenging questions. And that's why I love working with her, because she brings such a thoughtful and just deep energy to our relationship. And we've spent so long, and I miss those kitchen conversations, Luando, talking about important things in our life. But let me focus on these 2 questions that you've asked. And just to say, with the issue with children, it's such an interesting one, because I think that although the trauma is embedded in my children and they are going to have to confront it at some point in their lives, I think that the beauty with children is they're absolutely self-involved. So Josh was writing matric and Kati was in grade 8. And I think that their preoccupations meant that they didn't see the severity of what was going on around them. And I think Johnny and I very consciously, we didn't hide it, but nor did we make more of it. And I think that was very important, because I think they couldn't have received actually what was going on with, and stay resilient for what they had to go through in their lives. And I think, so the conversation for me with my children is just, in a way, beginning. It's ongoing. Josh read my book. Kati hasn't yet. She's had her own struggles. She had open heart surgery when she was very young. And I think she's had to confront a huge amount of anxiety around death in her own life. And I think Josh, through seeing his sister and his mother go through this, has had to also confront enormous challenges. And I think this is just the start of the conversation for me. So it's not a one-off. It's not something we sat down and we spoke about. But I never shared those letters, but the book is there. And my hope is that one day Kati will read that book and become part of the conversation in a way that is now life-giving, because here I am having the conversation in a way I never imagined. So it's a complex answer, but certainly I don't think I shared it. And my mother is sitting here next to me, and I have to say she helped enormously with my children. She was an absolute mainstay in their lives. She always has been. I salute her for that. I salute her as a granny, as a life-giving force to my children, and that was very helpful. In terms of love, that's the million-dollar question. What does love mean in all of this? I think that if I had a simple answer, it's the unexpected yoking together of pain and pleasure and loss and gain and being inside and outside for me. If I can say, for me, love is about a paradox. It's not about a simple journey. It's not about a straight arrow going forward. It's about the tension, the ongoing tension of refinding and recalibrating and reinventing the relationship in the face of all the world's challenges. And there are many. Mine is a very particular set of challenges, but I feel like there is the romantic love with my husband, but there's the love for colleagues, there's the love for friends, for my mother, and each one of those is a different kind of love, but everyone is shot through with this kind of balancing act between the good and the not so good, and holding those things together and having the power to communicate. I think if there's one thing I can say about love, it's about an openness to communicate. And if you don't have that capacity, I don't believe that, or let me say, I don't believe I could have survived all this if I hadn't been a grand talker. And I'll leave it there on that note.
I have to add to that. I think that what you've just said, the communication is so important. Communication is so important in healing.
Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, I could also talk indefinitely, which is probably why I enjoy doing this so much. But Shireen's hand is up and she's been waiting patiently. Shireen. So unmute yourself, Boki. There we go.
Oh, I really appreciate what both you and Lauren have shared. So I'm still very much in it at the moment, and it feels like a huge crumbling of the identity. I'm actually busy working through a beautiful book, The Secret Teachings of the Aramaic Jesus, and it teaches what he actually spoke in the Aramaic language and the depth and the insight around what the meaning of his words were in relation to how the St. James Bible has interpreted it. And they speak about the death of the identity. And I just wanted to speak to that experience. I'm feeling a bit emotional today because this is very much an unknown. I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I've been learning that what I thought was important in life is definitely not it. And that art of surrender and meeting the moment as it arises is, there's such a beautiful sense of presence, of spirit that emerges in that moment. And it's a very, very personal experience. It's in that quiet, silent waiting where that voice of innate knowing starts speaking more loudly. And I think, being faced with this idea of death is actually not scary. it's more for me a fear of what beyond this, how do I restart living again? Because what I've noticed, I've been a life guide for many years. I've been teaching skills that I now need to apply to myself. And there's a sense of needing to rebuild oneself beyond this moment of rest and rejuvenation, and not actually having any clue what that looks like and how it will move. But knowing on a very deep level that I've chosen this. It's part of the experience. And what is emerging for me through this understanding is recognizing that we have this idea of needing to struggle in life, especially women in a woman's body. There's the sense of we always are in pain with our menses, with childbirth, with struggling for survival. And then there's that other aspect to life when we learn to truly surrender and deepen into the depth of our our being, our sense of presence beyond the idea of who we think we should be in life. It becomes more easy to navigate. It's almost like letting the river take you. And what cancer has brought me is there's no other option. I need to let go right now and trust in the surrender of the moment. But what my question was, I just felt like I needed to share that because I'm practicing keeping the strength of my voice. I feel like I've been losing it a bit. So thank you for listening to that. But what I would like to pose to both of you is, have you either experienced a sense of shame around being broken, or you did something wrong and needing to kind of isolate because many people treat you that way and hold you in this idea of being ill? Because I've been following Abraham Hicks for many years, and they teach that it's very useful to not focus on the reality of this moment, and not many people are aware of that. So having conversations with people like my gran, for instance, she's very concerned. And it's hard to actually share the reality of the experience with people without going into that lower vibrational aspect of there's something wrong with me. So I wonder if you can speak to that.
Lauren, do you want to share
Well,
your thoughts?
just to start off by saying, just thank you, Shireen. I mean, it's so hard when you're in the midst of this to make sense of it all. And I think what just even speaking here in this conversation is a hugely brave and courageous act. And I'm not sure, to tell you the truth, I could have done it in the midst of my treatment. And I think that what you're seeing, I'm not sure if I'm speaking for Elaine too, but what you're seeing from my point of view is a really, I spent hours and years talking through this experience and in distilling it for myself and being able to present it in a conversation in this way. So I couldn't have done it. And I can see you just coming out of your treatment, I assume, or you're still in the midst of radiation. But I think good on you just for making those beautiful comments. And in terms of shame, you know, I alluded to it a little bit in the beginning of my talk. I think that it took a huge amount of work for me not to blame myself. So it wasn't so much the shame of that others inflicted, but my own shame of how do you get this so many times? Like, what is it in you that is causing your body to fight itself like this? And there was such a struggle in terms of asking those questions. And I read Wittgenstein and I read I can't remember who the other person's name, who says everything you say in your body. And I felt even worse about myself. My own self-shame kind of increased. And I really had to just spend a lot of time working through this issue of shame. And I think you'll get there. I can feel it. You'll get to a point where the shame is transformed into something more life-giving, which is what I think the whole journey is about. But I don't think you can do that in the middle of it.
Thank you, Lauren.
And adding to that again, Shireen, thank you so much for sharing and, you know, recognizing that your vulnerability is your gift, is your bravery, and it's beautiful. And all it's doing is just showing that we have these ideas sometimes post a situation or your life before, or where we think this is what the norm is, or we think this is what beautiful is. And I look at you and you are beautiful, and your vulnerability is beautiful, and your short story is brave. This is what brave looks like. This is why it's so important to share where we are, because part of that is, you know, the yoking is this coming together. And when we come together, we will heal. It's when we have separated on any facet in any area, that's where there's damage, and, you know, separation creates pain. So know that you are held, whether you feel it or not. And one of the things that for me was the most important thing is that you are not alone. It doesn't matter. You are not alone. And I think you do know that. I think we've chatted a couple of times, and go through the muck. It's like a lotus flower reveals its beauty because it's gone through all that mud, and you in the mud, but the lotus flower is, know that it's emerging. So just day by day.
Thank you. Thank you, Elaine.
And I know there were a lot of comments, if you look in the chat, of just so much love that was just sent to you, and just thoughts of kindness, and you know, and that's the thing. This is part of creating a community. You know, Lauren said it was the yoking, the coming together, and you know, going through treatment and going through this, the various years and all the diagnosis and the treatment. And to me, when you were chatting, I mean, that was my experience of, that was what I thought of as yoga. That was my most advanced yoga that I could practice, because the word for me truly only means yoking.
Yes.
Not so much pretzel, but yoking. This is yoga. This is the connection.
I relate, because the essence of yoga is, or tantra, is to be able to take something apart and then put it back together again. And that's weaving the tapestry of life. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. So much appreciation for both of you and for everyone in the group.
Pleasure. So pleased you were here again. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine.
So who else in the house wants to share? There was a lovely, Lauren, if you look at the chats, there were some lovely chats as well.
Yeah, thank you, Riz. Thank you for that beautiful comment. Really, it's been such a joy to work with you as well. I mean, really, it's a new family, as I said to you. My mother, who is not a speaker, wants to say something.
Oh, please. Wonderful. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Lauren's first diagnosis, I never knew what the word cancer meant. My husband and I were sitting watching, my late husband and I were sitting watching television, and we got the phone call from Lauren. I knew nothing about this disease, and I knew she had to go in for an operation. And that was the end of that. And her further diagnosis was just an absolute unbelievable revelation to me. And I must say, I was totally at sea as to how to handle her, how to handle myself, how to handle our relationship. It was really a very difficult time for me. And I've learned through Lauren what she's gone through, and I've learned about cancer, what she's gone through. And every time I listen to her, I learn a little bit more. And I really admire all of you ladies who've had this, gone through this journey and emerged as you have. Well done.
Thank you so much. That was so beautiful to hear, because it is so important to just know the pillars, our pillars that are next to us when we go through this. And much like you, I mean, I don't know about you, Lauren, but I also, you know, you don't know anything. You often don't know about it until you're in it, because then you have to just navigate. You dropped into this huge ocean. You never asked to be there, and suddenly you've got to swim. Otherwise, you're going to drown. So thank you to you, and I salute, you know, all of you, because it, you know, without me having my pillars that were next to me, I could never have got through it with as much, you know, sort of hope. I think hope. One of my closest friends is in the house actually, and she was also so pivotal. Just she dashed into the hospital when I was being wheeled in for my mastectomy, and just being able to see her face before I went in was so amazing. You know, when I think of an angel, she's the person.
Oh, you know, and I think that speaks back to Luanda's question about love, because I think there are many different forms of love. You know, my mother's form of love is not through words. She doesn't share that language with me, but she shares something very profound and shows her love in ways that are very different to mine. And it's also, love is about learning to see those different ways of receiving and giving. And I think if Rizwan is still on the call, she'll understand that a lot of love comes through food. And that's certainly my mother's language. And I know that Carol and Jessie might, and Gilly, you know, the language of love through food, Luando, is a whole question that you can take up, you know, going forward.
Lauren, speaking about love through food, we are having my mom's butter chicken right now.
As we speak.
That's absolutely fantastic, Helen Phoenix. I want some.
I know, I thought I'd make you jealous.
Yeah, you have made me jealous.
I'll drop some off, Lauren.
Oh, thanks,
And
Riz.
I'm happy to receive the language of food and love, but I can't give it.
Deep appreciation is what you can give. It's fine. And adding to that, I must say, I don't know if my sound is on. Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up. Yes. Okay. Because the title of your book, and I must confess, I haven't read your book, but there was enough of us to just have a conversation. I just dived in, phoned you, and we had our Zoom chat, and I think we could chat comfortably for hours anyway. But having a title, you know, a love story, cancer, a love story, it definitely, for me, and I love that, is that I had to look at all the, like you've just said, all the different levels, the tiers, of love and what it means. And we get so busy in our life, we think we moving through veils of love, but when you really have to be still, when you really can't be so busy, and you watch people give so much of their time, you see these amazing gold nuggets of love that just come through, like you say, in different forms. And I really did not have the time. I wanted it. It was probably my deepest desire. And I had a year of so much love, and I learned to love. to love being alive and to love life again and appreciate it. Such a blessing. So it truly is a love story.
I think that's right. I think that, you know, the title was at that there were times when I was discussing with the publisher, like, is this a title that's going to fly? Is it going to feel hard for people who are in the middle of the worst crisis of their life? Is this something you can say to someone who's, you know, like Shireen, going through such hard times? Can you talk about a love story? Is it insensitive? But I think when you understand the complexity of the love, and Luanda asked the perfect question, you understand it not in that very romantic and Hollywood style of love. You understand something much more about it. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the thing. We sometimes given very sort of illusory ideas of what love is or what we're supposed to do. And, you know, there's a great beauty in the process that you're going through, Shireen, as much as it feels cut. But that stripping, that exposing is magnificent. You've given the opportunity for a clean canvas, but with all your priorities now sort of recalibrated and in a place that I think you want them to be in.
Sure.
Thank you.
Love unmasks us. It certainly does. It certainly does.
I love the James Baldwin, that love is quest and daring. It's a beautiful answer. Thank you. I should have read that before, Luanda. I would have known how to answer you in a simple sentence.
Yes. But it's so lovely, the storytelling, you know, it just takes me back. Like, this is how we connected, you know, how we connected originally. Humans got together, you know, and I know certainly, like my grandparents, they came from shtetls. They sat around the table eating whatever they could, but it's the conversations and you know, I like that word, unmasking, sort of unmasking all the preconditioning and the assumptions, and sit around in a kitchen and really just share stories with so much love that we can all take home with us. How are we all doing? Is there anybody else that just wants to add to our conversation? Where are we at? Let's see. This has been such a good evening. I'm just so grateful that I know you've come on a lot of times. I hope this has been something that is just like had a nuance of something a little bit different, where you can just, you know, I love that your mom shared. Thank you so much for that. And that you now actually both, it looks like you're kind of sitting in your kitchen as well.
So we are. I just want to thank you, Elaine. I think we probably, yeah, I think that you open a conversation in a very special way. And I didn't expect tonight. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what to expect about it, but I didn't anticipate how beautiful it would feel just to talk to some people I know, some I don't, in this way. So thank you. Thank you for the platform, because it is about creating conversation, and you do it so beautifully with so much passion. So thank you. And thank you everyone for sharing as well and bringing joy.
Thank you. I'm so grateful. You know, what I learned, for me, the most important thing, there's somebody, Michael, can't seem to get a hand. Oh, Michael wants to say something. Levels of oneself, chance of healing. Yes, Michael, do you want to, just before we close up, I'd love to hear from you. Don't you want to unmute and just add your thoughts there? They were so beautifully written. Can you unmute yourself? Yes, there we go. All yours. Michael. He's unmuted. Michael? I'm not sure if he's going to speak.
It's not working.
No, it's not working. Shame. Did you read his message, Lauren?
Yes, I see it.
Beautiful, hey?
Yeah, thank you. Oh, it's Ilana. Thank you,
Ilana.
Ilana.
Okay. Sorry. So I just thank you so much, Lauren, for joining. This doesn't happen without all of you. This is for us. This is how we grow this is how we grow a community. This is being part of a new paradigm for me. You know, something you said earlier on, that desire to, you know, when you went through your various stages and kept on getting re-diagnosed, and you kind of just want to go back to normal. When does it go back to normal? You know, the words in and of itself, there's no going back. It's completely impossible. But we use that a lot. We've used it in body talk practitioner. We've used that in COVID, when things go back to normal, when things go to a point that we recognize again with some similarities, but they can never go back. And so that practice of just being here and then being here and then being here. But this is the best thing I could offer as a sense of service to community, because together we're doing this. There's no part of me that has been some mastermind in it. I thrive coming together and bringing community together, and that's what brought healing together. So, you know, all of you that maybe are new, that haven't been here before, I am on, please get hold of me, various social media. I'll put down my number. I have a WhatsApp group, and bring your stories. If some of you have a story, if you have friends that have a story, this is how we're all going to heal and definitely bring a healthier society together. So, Lauren, you are welcome in my kitchen absolutely anytime. So please, if there are more nuggets, we can just sit and have a lekker like hack together in the kitchen. And yeah, for all of you that haven't been here before, I'm usually do every 2 weeks. So the next guest that I have, and he has joined us, he's on my left in the corner, I don't know where it is on your screen, but Kevin Chaplin is going to be in the house in 2 weeks time. That takes us into March already, which is the 4th of March. Details will be coming soon to you. I think tomorrow I'll give you a nugget of, no, Monday, I'll give you sort of a nugget of what we're going to be speaking about, but here's a fabulous story as well. So thank you, everybody. Yeah, just tune in 2 weeks time again. And thanks again, Lauren. So
Elaine, can I say something?
Yes, please, go for it, Kev.
I just want to say it was difficult for me to join tonight. Also, there's something happening and I couldn't, and I felt I owed it to Elaine to join. And I'm just so humbled to see and hear some of you. It's really, really humbling to listen and to watch, and just to see all the faces and who's behind the name. I salute all of you. I mean, Shireen, your story is so powerful. You really see an amazing soul. Lauren and your mom and Elaine, and it's just phenomenal just to see. And that's what makes this world so special, to see what I'm seeing tonight and what I'm experiencing, and reading the chats. I'm blown away, and I really just want to salute each and every one of you tonight, because you've humbled me and inspired me of what makes life so special. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. You have an amazing story as well. So when we hear yours, when they hear yours, because I know part of it already, they're going to feel the same way. But I'm so grateful you came on, because I wanted you to feel the ease and the comfort and the naturalness, I think, that I'm hoping to create with this, how comfortable everybody is. So thank you. And his daughter's having an amazing birthday. So thank you for leaving the family and just stepping in for a little bit so you could get a feel of it. So thanks, Kev. Lots of love, everybody. Stay healthy and tune in and stay connected. I'll put my phone number in the chat. If anybody wants to join and doesn't have I don't know how to do this. Who knows how to do this? There we go. And doesn't have my WhatsApp number, please just take it down. Send me a WhatsApp, and I will post you every week who the speakers are. It's all for free, and I try and do recordings. So anyone you know might be interested, I do have a recording from tonight. So thanks, everybody.